All right, let's go ahead and get started. Let me introduce myself. My name is Stephen Walther, and I'm super excited to be in front of you today because I get to show you all the new features that are coming up with the next version of the ASP.NET framework. Now, I actually have two roles here today. I want to let you know about all the new stuff coming up in the next version of ASP.NET, but I'm also here to gather feedback from you to bring it back to the ASP.NET team. So if there are features that you like or you'd like to see different, please don't hesitate to come up to me during the conference, or if you really like a feature, don't hesitate to clap for a feature if you see something you really like on the screen. If you don't like it, you could sit there silently and give me a mean look. But the point is, I want to get your feedback on what you think about the new features that we're introducing with 4.0. So when I started working with ASP.NET all the way back in the year 2000 or so, it was a really straightforward framework in the sense that there was one way to create ASP.NET pages. You did it using the ASP.NET standard web form server technology. Now, over the past few years, starting with the release of ASP.NET 2.0, and it's accelerated as of today with the announcement of MVC, the ASP.NET framework actually encompasses a number of different frameworks. It's now designed to support a number of different styles of programming. So the original way I start with, the web forms way, is just one type of programming you can do with the ASP.NET framework. You can now we have a very rich AJAX framework, which I'll be talking about a little bit today. I have a whole talk dedicated to the AJAX framework stuff tomorrow. There's some, we've made huge investments in that area. There's also, you saw this morning, if you went to the keynote, you saw we just announced the MVC framework. Has just gone in final form. We released it to the web as of this morning. You can download it as we speak. That's another huge, change in the way that you can program using the ASP.NET framework. And finally, just out of curiosity, how many of you guys are using dynamic data? So, okay, hey, we got 5 back there. I'm going to talk a little bit about why in a moment, but that's another area in which we're making huge investments into dynamic data. So now we still have these underlying services, right? We have the .NET framework, which provides you with the data access story, with the underlying web services, all that kind of good stuff. Then we have the ASP.NET framework built on top of that, and that provides you with things like standard ways to cache data, or use session state, or to be able to do things that work across all of these frameworks on the top. But now we support very different styles of programming that will appeal to very different developers. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about all these different approaches tonight, but really what I'll be focusing on is ASP.NET Web Forms, because we have a lot of talks dedicated to the other subject areas. All right, before moving on though, I do want to emphasize that I won't be talking about ASP.NET 3.5 Service Pack 1. Now this was something slightly sneaky that we did, that Microsoft did. We came out with a bunch of major new features and called it a service pack while you weren't looking. The reason I call this a little sneaky is because these features are really important. The Microsoft AND framework is our new sort of data access store. It's the foundation for a lot of the other things that you'll be seeing this week. ADO.NET data services, again, that's our REST Atom Pub type story for data access over the web. Dynamic data was first introduced with the service pack. So if you weren't really paying that close of attention, you wouldn't have noticed that we introduced a whole new framework for you to build web applications. And finally, we added some major improvements to building AJAX applications with the service pack. My favorite new feature is browser history. You can use browser history if you're building an AJAX application to record back and forward buttons so that you can make it behave more like a server-side app. So when you hit the back button, instead of leaping to another website, you actually go back one page in your AJAX application. These are all great features. I'm not going to be talking about them because they were released, 6 or 8 months ago with Service Pack 1. I just want you to be aware of them if you hadn't noticed them, because these were a set of pretty important features added into ASP.NET. I'm really going to be focusing again on the new features in ASP.NET 4.0, the stuff that's coming up. Now, to provide some context for this talk, so I have something concrete to show you when talking about the new features, I'm going to be showing you a little sample application that I wrote using ASP.NET 4.0. This is the Crazy Pet Videos website. So what it allows you to do is, upload videos, funny videos of your pets and share them with other people. Now, I'm going to show you this in a moment so that you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. But before I show you this, I need to give you one big warning here. I'm running Windows 7, which is a still a beta operating system, and on top of Windows 7, I'm going to be showing you Visual Studio 2010, which is pre-beta, running on top of a beta Windows 7 operating system. I'm going to be showing you features of ASP.NET 4.0, which is also pre-beta. So please, have some compassion if something goes wrong. We are using a lot of different beta software stacked on top of one another here. So let me show you the sample video gallery website. So this is Visual Studio 2010, for those who haven't seen it yet, running on Windows 7. And I'm going to go ahead and run the website. There we go. Isn't that beautiful? I got the little logo and everything there. For some bizarre reason, I'm advertising for SQL Server for people who are going to a pet video website. I'm not sure why those people would be interested in that, but so I have my website. Let me just go through it real quick to show you what it does. I can navigate to different pages in it. I'm going to click on a page number. It's using a little jQuery to create an animation effect. I'm going to add a new video in, and title I'm going to say funny kitten video, and a video of a funny kitten. Click next. And I'm actually using a Silverlight control here. I'm a really bad Silverlight programmer. It's because I normally concentrate on web stuff. But the nice thing is I just went off to Codeplex and did a search, and I found actually a couple of really good Silverlight file upload controls. And I wanted something to show a little progress bar and something to give me a nice experience uploading files. So I just downloaded it and started using it. So I'm using this to do the file upload, and I have my little crazy kitty video. Click upload. There we go. It's right here. Here's my funny kitten, and I can click on watch video. Isn't that beautiful? There we have the kitten. Wow, that's loud. Can we turn that, sorry, can we turn that down? Anyway, so a teammate of mine, Scott Hanselman, said the way to get good evaluations on talks is to show as many pictures of kittens as possible. That's the secret to getting good evaluations on talks. Anyway, so this is using the Silverlight, it's using Silverlight to play the video out. I'm integrating some Silverlight stuff into an ASP.NET 4.0 website when needed. It's a very sort of straightforward website. Now, I haven't really shown you any features here that, it's not really the immediate sort of functionality that you see that makes ASP.NET 4.0 exciting. It's all the stuff that's going on under the covers. And there's a lot of interesting things going on the website if you start looking at the source code or you start looking at the URLs. So let me talk about actually what's going on under the covers here that has made this a better website. All right, so we're going to start by talking about ASP.NET Web Forms. We'll start with the first pillar. And really, the big improvements in ASP.NET Web Forms are all focused around making it easier to write good source code, to make you more productive if you're focused on writing source code. So we want to allow you to create a better front-end user experiences. So our investments have been around writing HTML tags, complying with standards, XHTML accessibility, and particularly AJAX support. So we've made a lot of improvements on the front end versus the back end. There's really, I'm just going to make this wild generalization. There's two types of developers in the world. There are developers who just love that designer experience, who like to work in the designer, do drag and drop, build up a page visually. And there's also another group of developers that are focused more on the source code. Those are developers who worry about every angle bracket, every pixel, and I'll just come out and say it. I'm more of a source code focused developer. I know there's that designer tab. I rarely actually hit it. I like to work directly in my source code because I want control over all the HTML tags and the appearance of the page. So I spend a lot of time working directly with source code. So we've made a lot of improvements that are focused on allowing you to have more control over how your controls render out things like their client ID, things like view state, things like your URLs that you're exposing out so that your websites can be more easily indexed by search engines. And we've made a lot of investments into XHTML and accessibility standards. Again, this can help with, indexability and also can help with accessibility. So really, all of these improvements are about putting you more in control over your website when you're building an ASP.NET application. So first feature I want to show you is, this is actually a new feature introduced with Visual Studio 2010. This is a feature called code snippets, and what it allows you to do is be more productive when you're writing out your HTML pages or your ASP.NET pages or your JavaScript files. So let me go ahead and show you a demonstration of how code snippets work. I'm going to open up a page right here, and I'll show you how to use code snippets. Now, there are several different types of code snippets you can use. There's HTML ones, ASP.NET, AJAX-specific ones, and JavaScript-specific ones. Let me start by showing you an HTML code snippet. Let's say I want to type out a table tag. I just want a standard HTML table tag. Now, within Visual Studio, I can just type table, and I'm going to hit the tab key. You can't actually see that from back here, but I'm hitting the tab key right here. Actually, I just hit the cap lock key. So I'm going to go for it's another big key. It was right there. There we go. And boom. Wasn't that beautiful? So it actually just automatically, it's kind of like a code snippet, but expands out automatically so you don't have to do all that typing. Now, there's some other ones. Well, there's a whole bunch of them. You might be wondering, well, how do I figure out what they are? Do I have to memorize these things? There's a couple of different ways you can find out. You can discover the code snippets. You can right-click and just go up to Insert Snippet, or if you've already selected an area, you want to surround that area, with a table tag, you can select it and then type in table, and it will do it. So you can do it like that. My favorite way, since I actually prefer to do as much stuff using the keyboard as possible, because I like to, think of myself as a super efficient, HTML programmer who's always working most effectively in the HTML source. We've given you some shortcuts, Control-KX. And what that'll do is it'll pop up this little menu, and then you can figure out what all the HTML ones, and hopefully at this point you'll memorize it so you never have to put it in again. Let's put in a BR one. I've never tried this one. Hey, it worked. Okay, good. So we have our, so you could do it, so you could discover them that way, and then you can kind of memorize them. So, again, this will save you lots of typing over time, which you could better use to do things like go see movies or something better than typing out HTML tags all day. So we have them for HTML. Another one that I like is, because I end up writing a lot of JavaScript code. I'm a huge fan of AJAX, so I tend to write a lot of JavaScript. So we have one for script. Hit tab there. So I created the opening and closing script tag. And we also have created a bunch of JavaScript snippets. So if I don't, you're always typing out JavaScript functions, right? So I can type function, tab, boom, and then I can put in the name of my function, do something, hit enter, and there we have it. So notice is actually it was a template there, right? I was able to fill out each of the things and quickly put in some code to do it. So that's pretty nice. I can quickly add a bunch of source code in without a lot of work. We also, of course, have ASP.NET snippets, and we know that the single most common ASP.NET control that you're ever going to put into an ASP.NET page is going to be a text box, right? I've probably typed out somewhere around 5 billion text boxes over the course of the last 8 years. So we want to make a really, really short code snippet for being able to put in a text box. So we came up with TB. That's about as short as we can get. So if you just type TB, tab, and we get our text box. And I'll show you, you can go ahead and change the name of the text box to, TXT first name. And the other thing that I'm always typing out when I'm writing ASP.NET controls are, I always, whenever I put a text box, I always put something like a required field validator on it. So I'll go ahead and do that. Hit tab, and put in my error message, required, hit enter. And what I want you to notice is, notice the control to validate. That picked up automatically on the fact that the text box was named TXT first name, so it figured it out from the previous line, so I didn't even have to fill that out. So anyway, so that's code snippets. If you want to learn more about code snippets, Jeff King has a talk. He's on the Visual Studio team. He actually does he turns on Eye of the Tiger, you know, the music, and he does it in real time. He shows you how fast he can type out a whole, you know, HTML page using code snippets. He looks very determined and types them out really fast. So definitely, if you want to learn more about them, go to his talk. Next thing I want to talk to you about is form view improvements. We've actually, for a lot of the controls, we've been investing energy into allowing you to create them in a more standards compliant way. Now, back in 1999, when Scott Guthrie was first dreaming up the ASP.NET framework, people didn't use CSS for layout. That was back in, you did layout, you were a designer, that's what HTML tables are for, right? That's how you make columns. Things have changed over time, and so we've had to adapt the framework to work with changing ways that people design pages over time. So one of the things we've discovered is, most designers now don't want to use tables for layout. They want to do everything using CSS, and so we're trying to migrate as many of the controls as possible over from using the old table-based layout method to be able to use straight CSS if you need to do it. So in the case of the form view control, we had a new property called render table equals false. Let me show you how that property works. First, here's just a page. It's a form view control. I have it bound to an entity data source control, and it's just showing one of those videos. It's just grabbing like the first video out and showing the title of the video. Form view control is a standard control in the ASP.NET framework for just showing one record at a time. So if I right-click and say View in Browser, I get dog playing piano. And if we take a look at the source, now, first of all, this should horrify you a little bit. We'll get to that. Well, that's the, does everyone know what that is, by the way? Yeah, exactly. It's the view state stuff. So don't worry, we've taken care of that as well. So I'll show you how we took care of that in a moment. But if we get past the view state, we can get down and surprise, there's this table here. Where'd the table come from? Well, the table comes from the form view control will automatically render out a table by default. You probably don't want that anymore because you're not using tables for layout. If you want to, you want to disable that, all you have to do is add a new attribute onto your form view control. Render table equals false. Say view in browser. So this looks exactly the same, right? There's no, there'd be some difference if there was tags before and after it, obviously, but if you take a look now, notice all this beautiful emptiness. So it's like a, a clear meadow now without any table tags inside of it. So if you wanted to, you could wrap this with a div, do the layout in the normal way. It's a way to allow you to build more web standard compliant web pages. Okay. Next thing I want to show you is, we made some improvements to the list view control. So list view control is a standard control in the ASP.NET framework for showing a bunch of database records, right? It allows you to iterate through a set of database records and show each one using a template. In the past, if you were going to use a list view control, you had to add at least 2 templates into it. You had to create a layout template that defines kind of the opening and closing tag, the total layout of the list view, and then you create an item template that specifies how each data item is formatted that's being pulled in from the data source. Well, we wanted to simplify it because in a lot of cases you really don't need a layout template. So we can just get rid of that and just put in an item template all by itself. So let me show you an example of that. So here's the old way up here. I want to show here a bulleted list of, again, of video titles. So I have to have both the layout template and I have the item template, so I need 2 of them. The new way is down here. Whoops, I went scrolling by pretty fast. Using the new way, notice that let me highlight it a little bit here. Using the new way, notice I have my UL tag outside of my list view. That's okay, right? Because this is just going to repeat through and show the records. And my closing one down here, I no longer need the layout template. So I get my bulleted list, a little less typing to do it. So they'll render out the same way. There's no difference in actually the rendered output of these 2 things. And we get 2 lists. Make sense? Okay. All right, view state. So we've already encountered view state. View state, I first want to start by saying, view state is a good thing. It was actually a fundamental innovation of ASP.NET to introduce the concept of viewState. What viewState enables you to do is add state to the HTTP protocol where state doesn't natively exist, right? As long as you do a postback, you have viewState, you can retain the state of all your controls. So a lot of the ASP.NET controls simply wouldn't have worked without viewState. But what we did when we created the ASP.NET framework is we turned viewState on by default. And what that meant is most developers are pretty lazy about turning off viewState. In a lot of cases, you really don't need it. And in that case, what you're doing is you're just wasting a lot of bandwidth by stuffing a bunch of stuff into viewState. So we want to give you a way to easily flip the equation. We want to give you a way to have viewState disabled by default and then allow you to selectively enable it so you're not putting huge amounts of data into that hidden viewState form field. So what we did was we created a new property of the base control class called the viewState mode property. Has 3 possible values: enable, disabled, and inherit. And the way it works is, remember a page is a control, right, in the ASP.NET framework. So you can go ahead and set a page viewState mode on a page to be disabled. And then any child control, unless you explicitly enable it, it will have viewState turned off. You can do that for a content control or a panel control, and that way you can selectively enable viewState in your applications. Let me show you a sample of that. So in this page, I have 2 label controls, and you'll notice that only in the case of the second label control is viewState enabled, the viewState mode enabled explicitly. And you should also notice that for the entire page, viewState mode is set to disabled. So by default, none of the controls will use viewState. But I've turned it on explicitly for one of the label controls. And we can see that if I go ahead and run this page, say view in browser, you'll notice that I have trace on down here so you can see the amount of viewState each control is taking up. If you look down here in the bottom, you'll notice the 2 labels are eating up 52 bytes of viewState each. If I now do a postback, you'll notice that this doesn't have viewState enabled, the first label, so it's not going to show anything after the postback. And down here you'll see that there's only 1 label eating up the 52 bytes. So it's a really great way to reduce the size of your viewState. If you're just displaying database data in a list view, don't have viewState turned on for the list view. That's going to put all that database data into that hidden form field. That's just crazy. What you want to do is make sure that you really need that. Make sure that you really need it enabled before you start selectively enabling it for your controls. Make sense? Great. Great question. So question is, there's already a property called enable viewState. The problem is that you guys are all too lazy to use it. The problem with enable viewState is that you have to do it for each control that you want to turn it off. We wanted to come up with an easy way so that viewState is disabled for everything. And notice that the default value on this slide for the viewState mode is inherit. So this gives you an easy way to selectively enable viewState. So have everything off by default and then re-enable it selectively in the page. If you're using the enable viewState equals false, you have to remember to set it for all of your controls in the page. Yes? Yes, absolutely. And it also works with content controls. So you can even do it on the top level content control and have it go down within a master page. Okay, next sort of pain point that we've heard from developers in the past has to do with working with client IDs. This is a pain point that I've felt because, again, I do a lot of JavaScript. I use CSS for layout because it makes me feel good because I'm following the right standards to do it. But the problem is that the problem you run into when you're doing this with ASP.NET controls is a control ID doesn't necessarily correspond to the client ID that gets rendered out by a control. There's a good reason for this again. Think of you're creating like a list view, and inside of an item template you put a label tag for txt first name. Well, if that's inside of an item template, that's going to be repeated like for each database record, right? So you get 50 copies of that label with the same txt first name. You're going to end up with all these txt first name tags in your page. You can't use document.getElement by ID anymore to be able to grab any of those elements because you have like 50 copies of it. So the ASP.NET framework does everything it can to prevent you from shooting yourself in your foot by automatically qualifying your client IDs when you're using master pages, because you could have 2 content areas that both have the same control of the same name, or you're using templates, so it qualifies it. Now again, the problem with that is it can create difficulties when you're doing client-side stuff. For example, let's say that for some reason, and I can't really come up with a convincing one, but for some reason I've decided I want to create a calendar control in a page. So I just have created a calendar control here, and I've also decided I'm going to use a little bit of jQuery and make that calendar shake back and forth. That's real. There's a real business need for this. I want to make a shaking calendar in my page. So what I'm doing is, this seems like the obvious way, right? I'm using jQuery to grab out the calendar. Don't worry if you don't know jQuery, we'll talk about it in just a second. But I'm grabbing out that calendar control. That's what the corresponding ID is down here. So that should make that calendar shake. Let's go ahead and try this. Everyone get ready for the shaking calendar. And there we go, no shaking calendar. I'm massively disappointed here. Notice I put this into the master page, the Crazy Pet Video master page. Let's take a look at the ID for the calendar control. And if we take a look at the ID, you'll notice that the ID is CTL00 underscore content placeholder. That's from the master page one, underscore calendar 1. So we got all this stuff tacked into the beginning, again, because we're in a master page just trying to prevent naming collisions here. So that's not good, though, because it makes it really hard to make that calendar shake. So what I can do is if I want more control over it, is I can change the client ID mode. And again, this works by inheritance. It has 4 possible values. You can set to legacy, so it works just like it works right now. So it would generate the control in the same way. By the way, we're going to change the name of that because calling something legacy only works with one release of a framework. So we need to come up with another name for this. But anyway, for the moment, it's called legacy. The other possibility, this is actually my favorite setting right here, you can set it to static. And when you set a client ID to static, that says, you know what? Allow me to shoot myself in my foot if I want to. Whatever I claim for the client ID, that's going to be what's rendered out. And yeah, it gives me control. Hey, great. Yeah. So this is great because it makes it really easy now to target with the JavaScript. I'll talk about predictable in a moment, but let me go ahead and show you how to use the static setting. There we go. Now remember, I can shoot myself in the foot now. I could create another, another control with the same ID and another content area in the master page. But the advantage of this, it was already open, wasn't it? Okay, let me go ahead and open it again. The advantage of this is that we get our beautiful shaking calendar. Isn't that nice? So, because now when it renders out, it actually has the ID of calendar 1. So it makes it really easy to hit. Fantastic question. Yeah, so yes, you can, and that's my next slide. There we go. So you can set client ID mode to static, and then it'll just automatically be static. Now, if you have any list view controls in your page, you're going to have all the issues there. You could selectively override, though, for a list view if you needed to change it. But yes. So let's talk about predictable. Predictable is a little more difficult to explain. We're actually considering making this the default setting for the new project template by just putting in the web.config file. The predictable shortens the namespace prefixing on control IDs when it renders it out. It also gives you a more predictable way of referring to rows when you're using a template. So let me show you a quick sample of that. So here I have a list view, and I want to highlight the row being rendered out for the list view that corresponds to the primary key of 4. Down here, what we've done is we've added new properties onto all the different, the grid view, the list view, all the different data controls that show a set of items to allow you to specify the client ID suffix. So I can go ahead and say, use the primary key from the underlying table and generate the suffix that way. And so if I run this, it gives me an easier way to be able to highlight a particular row because I know now that that's, corresponds to the one primary key 4. So it's a little more difficult to understand, but it gives you a way under your control to be able to generate the client ID. Okay, next topic. ASP.NET routing for search engine optimization. That title on my slide was too long. So if you've worked with ASP.NET MVC, then you've already worked with the routing infrastructure. Out of curiosity, how many of you have already used MVC? Wow, fantastic. That's like 50%. Beautiful. So if you used routing, you're probably already in love with the idea of routing. As you saw in this keynote, if you saw Jeff Atwood and Jeff and Joel talking about Stack Overflow, one of the big things they emphasized about it was to get into search engines. That's what they started thinking about immediately when they started building the website, because we know that you guys want to make money, and one good way to make money is to get as many pages indexed in a search engine as possible so you actually get some traffic at your website. So the routing infrastructure was originally developed for MVC, but we ported it over so that you can also use it within the context of web forms. So you can have more intuitive URLs when you're creating web form pages, and that gives you all the same benefits. So instead of having to write, let's say you have a search page and want to allow people to search for videos of cats, instead of using method number 1, where you have to, this is how you'd have to do it today, you could use routing to be able to make the URL more intuitive and, more importantly, more indexable by using the routing infrastructure. So let me show you how routing works in the context of ASP.NET Web Forms. I shouldn't have done that. So the way it works is, it works pretty much the same way as it does in MVC. In your global.asax file, you can work with the route table. And the route table is just a static collection of routes. So there's a property, this is a static property, routetable.routes, which has just a collection of routing rules. And let me show you an example of a routing rule. This last one right here. What I'm doing is I'm creating a new route called myroute, and I'm mapping this URL pattern right here. If you type in your address bar of your browser, if you type in custom / and a number or anything, that's going to be mapped over to a route parameter called ID by name, and then that's going to be passed to this page called routing2.aspx. And I'll show you how ID gets passed over to the page. So that's how you create a route. You just create a pattern, and then you create the page that it maps to. Okay, now that I've done that, I can go to my routing page. And this is a page that creates the link to the route. One of the things we did is we added a new expression builder, a route URL expression builder. Are you guys familiar with expression builders? They've been in the ASP.NET framework since 2.0, but the only time most people run into them is when you're localizing stuff, or when you're putting those connection strings, when you're using like an object data source control. But we create a new expression builder for using the routing stuff. We can give the name of the route, and you can give a value for the ID, and that'll auto-generate now the right URL given the route we just defined in the global.asax file. So I'll go ahead and run that, view in browser, and there we go. If you look at the URL, see that's a nice intuitive URL, video gallery / custom1. Actually, you probably can't see that. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to go to the page, and then I'm going to zoom in up here so you can see that a little easier. There we go. So, that's something that is very search engine friendly, right? Any search engine in the world is going to love that thing. There's no query string in there at all. Makes it very easy to index. Then people can find my great video of a dog playing a piano very, very easily because I actually have the ID right in the URL. All right, so how did I get that ID out on the target page within this page? If we look in routing 2, there's a couple ways you can do it. Page load, what I'm checking for is I'm checking to make sure that an ID was actually passed to the page. If not, I want to redirect them off to a page called missing ID. And we've added a new property now onto the page class called route data, and it just contains a collection of values. It's just a key value lookup. We can just grab those values out. So all I had to do to define that ID route value was remember that route pattern. That defines it. So now I can pull out the value of ID. The other thing we did was we added a new parameter type down here. So in this page, I have a form view control that's bound to an entity data source. I can use this with an object data source or a SQL data source or a link to SQL data source or any data source you want to create. But we added a new parameter called a route parameter. And the way a route parameter works is it allows you to grab something out of that route collection. So you can also do it declaratively like this. So it gives you a very clean way to be able to pass route information from one page to another. So you can do all the clean URLs, the exact same clean URL stuff within the main web forms framework as you can within ASP.NET MVC. Make sense? Cool. All right. Yes, there's a question. So I have a tutorial on the ASP.NET MVC website on that. There are some complications there. You'd either have to use wildcard mapping, which does have performance implications. Yeah, actually, you'd have to use wildcard mapping, or you'd have to make sure you always have extensions. You'd use the same methods as you would in MVC. That's a limitation of IIS 6 and below, as you know. IIS 7, you don't have to do anything special to get it to work. But see the tutorial on the ASP.NET/MVC site, because I have one for you doing it for MVC. It's the same issue as for web forms. That's a great question. Okay. Other search engine improvements. Well, these are in one way kind of minor, but on the other hand, they make a huge difference to getting your web pages indexed by search engines. So in that sense, they're really, really important. What we've done is we made it very easy to add a description to every page on your website, because most people are pretty lazy about putting in those meta tags that you need to get a search engine to give a right description for your pages. Those matter to search engines, right? They analyze what you have in your meta description tag, and they use that when they index your pages. Most search engines are too smart these days to pay attention to keywords, because everyone always lied in their keywords anyway. So, but those are still important if you're indexing internally, if you want to create, a meta keywords tag. So we've made it really easy by, if you want to add a meta description and meta keywords tag, all you have to do is do it with these attributes up here on the top of your page. So it makes it really easy to remember to do it, for one thing. You just put description or keywords at the top of the page, and that will automatically generate the meta tag. Notice here, I've set the description to the description for the web page. Not a very creative description, but that's what I set it for. And now if I do view in browser, it says please index me. If I go to view source, you'll see that I do, in fact, get that meta description tag right there. But this was kind of a trick demo. It says content equals foo instead of, the description I just put in the page. Now you might be wondering, well, what happened? I'm supposed to be showing you this feature here of adding in the meta tags automatically. Well, one nice thing is all this stuff supports localization. So you'll notice that optionally, I don't have to do this. If I just left out this part, it would go ahead and just put this in. But I can set the resource key to the page resource, to page resource 1, and then I can automatically localize that based on different languages, French, German, whatever. So I have a localization file right here for English. All you have to do if you've localized stuff before is standard localization stuff. So I have one for English, and then I have another one for French, and I think in the French I put le fou or something like that for the description for it. So you can very easily get this not only indexed within English language search engines, but across different language search engines if you need to. Okay, the other improvements is we've added a new type of redirect. You've all used response.redirect before to redirect someone to a new page. Under the covers, response.redirect sends off an HTTP status code. Here's a cheat sheet for status codes in case you've forgotten what they are. But you use status codes being sent from a server to tell a browser to redirect to another page. Normally you're setting off a 302. That tells the whatever's trying to request the page that the page is temporarily moved. And so next time the search engine or the browser will again request the same URL to get the same page. The other option is you can do a permanent redirect. You can do a 301 status code instead of a 302. When you do a permanent redirect, the search engine will no longer try to get the original URL. It'll just go right to the redirect URL in the future. That's important if you want to improve your website statistics, because it's important from the point of view of a search engine to know what the permanent URL for a resource is. So we've added this new page.redirect permanent. And since that is a method, you could programmatically even redirect search engines around if you needed to. Let me show you a quick sample of that. So on this page, I'm calling response.redirect permanent. I'm sending you back to that page we just looked at, to the one with the description and keywords in it. I'm going to go ahead and open it up here in IE. And there's no reason you should believe me in IE that's running, that's doing a permanent redirect. So actually, let me open up Firefox, and I'll take advantage of Firebug. And I'm going to go to the original page. Hit return. It should do a permanent redirect. It does. I'm going to go over here to take a look at the, why isn't it showing up here? Try that one more time. Okay, go. There it is. I don't know why it didn't work the first time. But anyway, so down here, notice that I have a 301 move permanently for that first request. So we know it is doing a permanent redirect. So that's nice. It gives you an easy way to control that. Okay, web standards. So this is an area where we're actively investigating and actively working. One thing that we're actually trying to figure out, and I'd like to get some feedback from you guys on, is the whole issue of XHTML and transitional compliance. Now, I actually wrote the original sort of web standards guidelines for the ASP.NET team all the way back with the ASP.NET 2.0 release. And originally we targeted XHTML strict, but you know that XHTML strict is very strict. You can't use like target attributes if you're doing, you know, like in an href, that's not allowed. And there are some other issues about like using name instead of ID in the JavaScript. So I'm curious, how many of you people are actually targeting XHTML strict right now in the pages that you create? A significant portion. How many of you are doing transitional? A lot more are doing transitional. That's interesting. So I'd love to, if you see me during the week, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because this is one of those places where we are actively, you know, trying to figure out, well, what's the right thing to do. Of the people who are doing XHTML strict, are you people serving out using an XHTML MIME type, or are you just using the text HTML MIME type? Is anyone creating a truly strict XHTML website right now? Okay. That makes sense, since there's not many browsers that support it. So I was just curious if that was something that, that you were targeting. The other thing is accessibility standards. We put a lot of work into making sure, you know, we built in, as of ASP.NET 2.0, the accessibility checker into Visual Studio. At that time, we were targeting Section 508 and, you know, the WCAG standards. There's new standards around ARIA that we're actively investigating now for rich internet applications for our JavaScript story and AJAX on the client side. How many of you people are interested in ARIA? How many people are investigating it or thinking about it? No one right now. How many people are accessibility standards important to, like the Section 508 standards? Wow, a lot of you. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, very cool. All right, next thing I want to show you, I'm going to show you a new control that we're introducing with ASP.NET 4.0 called the Query Extender Control. And what the Query Extender Control enables you to do is, it enables you to, if you're using a control that's using the iQueryable interface, in other words, the link to SQL control or the link or the entity data source control, you can use the filter control to be able to filter out the data that the data source displays. That probably made no sense whatsoever, so I'll try again. What I find it useful for is creating search pages. So let me show you on the Crazy Pet Video website how it works. So I want to add a search page onto the website. So let me go ahead and just run it first and show you what the search page does. Really simple one. So if I click on search, and I just want to find all the videos that have to do with a piano, type in piano, type search, and then it just shows this one video right here. So, you know, that's a pretty common requirement, right? Being able to restrict the results that you're getting back from a query. How did I do that? Well, if we take a look at the source for this page, in this page I have a standard text box control, nothing special there. And I have a standard grid view control where I'm displaying the results, and the grid view is bound to, in this case, a linked data source control. I could have also bound it to an entity data source control. But the special thing I'm doing here is I'm taking advantage of this new query extender control. And what the query extender control enables me to do is filter the results that are returned by, in this case, a linked data source control. What I'm doing is I'm saying go ahead and filter the results based on the title or description. Now, if you're familiar with the way that link works, the way the iQueryable interface works, you know it doesn't actually perform the filter until it's back on the database side, right? You're building up an expression. That expression isn't evaluated until you start iterating over the records. So the nice thing about taking this approach is this is still extremely efficient. in terms of the database operation happening in the back end, because it doesn't actually have to pull all the data out and filter it. What I can do is you're building up this expression declaratively on the client side, and then it fires off the filtered expression in the background. So it gives you a really easy way. Now, you can do it, there's a lot of different types of expressions you can use here. I happen to be using the search one. You can also use a range expression if you want to filter by a range of expression. You can also filter where a property has a certain value. Or you can even you can write your own code and come up with a custom filter expression if you wanted to. So it gives you an easy way to declaratively filter out your results when you're doing a query. ASP.NET Core enhancements. I'm just going to mention these very quickly. Cache extensibility. I'm super excited about velocity. I know there's some sessions on velocity. If you haven't looked at velocity yet, velocity is the code name for a new distributed cache system for ASP.NET. It allows you to distribute a cache across multiple servers. Even allows you to cache session state more efficiently. So important if you're building up a web farm and you want to take full advantage of caching. We've opened up our cache API so that anyone can go out there and build their own cache provider. We're using the provider model for caching. So if you wanted to store your cache in the cloud, you can do that. Browser capabilities extensibility. I actually have a really great demo that I'm not going to show you. I love saying that. But go to Chris Wood's talk, and Chris Woods is going to talk about a new download that he's going to make available. Chris Woods works for the live services team, and what they've done is they've taken all the browser capabilities information from sites like Hotmail and from MySpaces, information on hundreds and hundreds of different devices, and we're giving that away for you for free. And you can use that with the device capabilities things to easily check to see if someone's using an iPhone, for example, or a Windows mobile device, and show the right size of the page and all that for different devices. There's also, if you go to Scott Hanselman's Nerd Dinner talk, he's going to show how to create Nerd Dinner in such a way that's mobile compatible. So he's going to use the Chris Woods mobile device stuff there too. The session state compression, that's I think the Stack Overflow guys mentioned that was something that they got a lot of efficiencies out of. We now give you the option. You just have to set one attribute in the web.config file, and it will automatically compress using gzip compression your session state when it stores it out of process. So if you're storing session state right now using SQL Server or a separate Windows service, the amount of you can dramatically reduce the amount of traffic going across your network by compressing it. It will take up more CPU cycles, but it will reduce the amount of traffic going across your network. And in some scenarios, apparently Stack Overflow, that can result in really dramatic improvements to performance in session state. All right, so that's it in terms of the improvements that we've made to web forms, to the core sort of ASP.NET web forms. Now remember, that's only one of the 4 pillars now of ASP.NET. I want to talk just very briefly about ASP.NET Ajax. The reason I'm going to talk very briefly about ASP.NET Ajax is because I have a whole talk devoted to it tomorrow. Which I'll advertise right now, where I just concentrate on all the new improvements there. This is one area where we've just made a huge number of changes. This is basically a new Ajax framework that we're introducing for ASP.NET 4.0. The reason it's a new Ajax framework is it includes support now for client-side templates. These are compiled client-side templates. I'll explain more what that means tomorrow. Client-side controls. So these are pure JavaScript cross-browser compatible controls that you can use to be able to display database data. Client-side data binding, read-write database access. If you want to allow people to update database records in the browser and then persist those into an underlying database, we make it extremely easy to do that. And this is not tied to ASP.NET. So I actually say, it will work with alternative frameworks like PHP. We don't care. As long as your server-side framework exposes JSON data out, we'll work with it. So this is a framework-compatible ASP.NET Ajax framework, which I'm devoting a whole talk to tomorrow if you're interested in learning more about it. The other thing we've done with ASP.NET Ajax is, the size of a JavaScript library is hugely important, right? Because you want to make sure that you can get those libraries down to the browser as fast as humanly possible. So what we've done is we refactored the libraries out so they can pull down smaller sets of them if you don't need all of them. I want to show you one quick demo of ASP.NET Ajax because it is so cool. and I had to do it for my Crazy Pet video website. So what I did is I created this page right here. Notice, by the way, this is an HTML page. This is not an ASP.NET page. It could be an ASP.NET page, but I want to emphasize the point here that this is not tied to the server-side ASP.NET, web forms, MVC, whatever framework. This is all client-side. Notice that I have no JavaScript in this code at all. You can go through this with a fine-tooth comb and you won't find a single line of JavaScript. I am doing 2 includes for libraries, JavaScript libraries here, but I didn't have to write those libraries. Those are the standard Microsoft Ajax libraries. I have my client-side data view control, which I've attached to a UL element by using sys::attach. And I've told it where a web service is, where I can get the list of videos. And I told it to go ahead and call the get videos method on that web service. And I've created a template using this, the double curly braces to tell it where to inject the properties it's getting back from the server. And that's all I have to do. And now if I say view in browser, we get, isn't that beautiful? So it's actually access the database, didn't have to write a single line of server-side code. Well, that's not true. I had to write the web service. But I didn't have to, create an ASP.NET page to get this to work. This is using a template on the client side. So I think that's pretty great stuff. So again, I'm devoting a talk to this stuff tomorrow. Okay, but there's more to Ajax than just the client-side stuff, even though, at this particular moment, that's what I'm most excited about. So I'm going to go back to this slide. There's actually 4 components now to our Ajax story. We have the server-side Ajax update panel. How many of you guys use the update panel, by the way? Wow, a lot of you. Huge number of you. Great. That's fantastic. Update panel makes it very easy to take an existing ASP.NET application and Ajaxify it, right? You just wrap some controls in an update panel, and you have it. So we have server-side Ajax covered. I'm going to talk about client-side Ajax tomorrow. You guys, by now, I hope, have all heard about jQuery, what we're doing with jQuery. So that's another part of our story. And then there's the Ajax Control Toolkit. So let me talk a little bit about jQuery. Oops, I just went right by it. Okay, so jQuery, of course, was not created by Microsoft. If it's not the most popular Ajax framework out there, it's definitely in the top Ajax framework. It's created by John Resig, a very smart guy. I first ran across him because I read he had a great JavaScript book that I read a while ago. It is open source, and this is something new for Microsoft. We're offering product support for an open source piece of software that we didn't write. The reason for that is we ran into a choice point. We had to make a decision because we started to discover that we wanted to do a lot of the things that jQuery was doing within our own Ajax framework because we started to want to create client controls and do stuff with the Ajax Control Toolkit. And so at that point, we had to decide, well, do we go off and reinvent it ourselves? Or do we go off and leverage and contribute back to the community where there's already a great framework for doing it? So we picked option B, and we decided to. But one issue that we wanted to address is a lot of our customers are wary about using open source software. And the reason for that is product support, right? You want to pick up the phone and call someone at midnight on Christmas Eve and yell at someone. And that's what we excel at, having people that are yelled at. But you want someone to be able to handle product support. Now, this is actually a tricky area because we're offering product support for an open source software that we don't own. So we're inventing this new type of product support called best effort support, where what we'll do is we'll make our best effort to resolve the issue that you're running into. If we find a bug in the underlying jQuery framework, we can't change jQuery. It's not our stuff, but we'll contribute it back as a member of the community, just like everyone else, to be able to update the underlying jQuery framework. So what we'll do is we'll act just like any other member of the community, and hopefully, over time, we'll contribute a lot back to the core jQuery library so everyone can benefit, even if you're running on a different framework than ASP.NET. We are providing that support as of now. That's right. In fact, you can go to, I think I just moved it last night. We were debating about where to put the product support stuff on the ASP.NET site. It might be, if they haven't moved it this morning, at the bottom of ASP.NET/MVC. We had a blurb on the bottom that explained exactly what the product support is. But one thing I should emphasize is we've shipped this now. As of this morning, jQuery is shipped with ASP.NET MVC. It is now part of an official Microsoft project. So MVC was released. Officially, it's in the project template. So yeah, so we've started supporting it now. We will be shipping it in Visual Studio 2010 in the project template for web forms as well. So it's going to be in all future versions of ASP.NET. Now, one thing is, of course, you can start using it today. Go to the jQuery website, download it, and start using it in your web applications. We've added fantastic IntelliSense support for jQuery. What that means is, if, heaven forbid, I don't know why you wouldn't want to do this, but if you decide you didn't want to write your pages using ASP.NET, you want to use some alternative framework like PHP, that means that Visual Studio is still a great environment for building JavaScript applications, because we provide you a full jQuery IntelliSense. We're adding, we have great JavaScript IntelliSense. If you want to see how to get the full jQuery experience, go to Jeff King's blog, because you do have to download one quick fix to Visual Studio to open up everything, because we had to do some changes in the way that we looked at the IntelliSense. Okay. The other thing is, how many of you are using the Ajax Control Toolkit? Well, just about everyone, it looks like. Maybe, I don't know, I don't think you raised your hand, but almost everyone in the room is using it. So that's the Ajax Control Toolkit is a set of 30 plus controls. And the nice thing about the Ajax Control Toolkit is you can, well, for one thing I should emphasize, it's the second most popular download from Codeplex right now, so it's a hugely popular product from Microsoft. It allows you to do everything purely on the server side if you wanted to, so if you don't want to touch any JavaScript at all, and you want to add things like modal pop-ups, or you want to add an autocomplete text box, all this stuff using JavaScript stuff, and you don't know JavaScript. You can go ahead and start using it in your ASP.NET applications. But on the other hand, if you're a huge fan, like me, of client-side JavaScript, you don't have to use the server-side stuff at all. You can use it purely from the client side. Again, I'm going to mention, alternative frameworks. If you don't want to do this in ASP.NET, you can even use it with alternative frameworks like Java or PHP and do everything from the client side. One of the things that we shipped not so long ago, I think like 5 months ago, is we shipped a client-only version of the Ajax Control Toolkit, so you can use that in your applications. One thing that I want to emphasize is that we have ongoing development around the Ajax Control Toolkit. And another thing this week, if I'd be really interested to hear if there are particular controls you'd like to see in it or particular changes to it. We're actively investigating that right now, so I'd love to hear feedback on that from you as well. Okay, ASP.NET MVC, we have a number of different talks on MVC this week. I'm not going to spend any time talking about MVC because, make sure you go to either see Hanselman's talk tomorrow on their dinner, complete application with MVC, or see Phil Hack. He's a program manager for ASP.NET MVC. See his talk tomorrow at 4:15. If you, for some reason, have been living in a cave somewhere and haven't heard of MVC, MVC is an alternative framework to web forms. Gives you a way to have a clear separation of concerns. So if you want to do pattern-based application development and you want to really loose coupling between the different layers in your application, you can use MVC to do it. Gives you fine-grained control over HTML and JavaScript. One thing that my day job is writing tutorials and videos for MVC. So one good way to learn more about it, my own biased opinion, is to go to the ASP.NET/MVC website. And I have a bunch of new videos that we just put up on learning MVC. So I have a walkthrough, for example, of creating a basic database-driven application. If you have no idea what MVC is because you haven't had a chance to work with it, I'd suggest going to that website to start with and taking a look at some of those videos. The ASP.NET, we have a tab now. We have a tab as of this morning too, so you can also just hit the MVC tab on the ASP.NET site and look at the videos. Dynamic data. Dynamic data, we've made huge investments into improving dynamic data for ASP.NET 4.0. Again, a lot of people didn't even notice that it came out because we snuck it out with Service Pack 3.5. This is a powerful framework. Let me give you an example. For example, let me give you an example of how dynamic data is used. Dynamic data is our scaffolding story, our dynamic scaffolding story for ASP.NET. So it enables you to auto-generate a website by just adding the right attributes into your database model. So I wanted to, for my Crazy Pet video website, I wanted an easy way to edit the descriptions of the videos, delete them, insert them in. I didn't want to write basic CRUD stuff, right? Create, read, update, delete stuff. I didn't want to write all the pages for that. I just wanted them to be generated for me automatically, so I could be extremely lazy about it. So I took advantage of dynamic data. I just added it into my existing ASP.NET web form site. Let me show you how that works. So I have an admin link right here. I'm going to go ahead and click on it, and boom. So I didn't have to write any of this stuff. This is all being generated by dynamic data. If I want to go down here and edit my dog playing piano one, I can go ahead and just edit it here. This is created for me automatically. Click update. Now it's called Dog Playing Piano 2 from now on. And so the nice thing is if you're creating things like admin websites, this makes it really easy to do. But the other advantage of dynamic data is it allows you to customize down. Let me explain what I mean by that. All of this stuff is customizable. It's all template driven. So if you want to completely change the appearance of any of this stuff, you can do it by just changing the right type of template. Now in Dynamic Data 1, we had two basic types of templates. We had page templates and field templates. One of the feature I'm most excited about with ASP.NET 4.0 is we're introducing this new type of template called an entity template. And an entity template, instead of being tied to a page or being tied to a particular field, is tied instead to a particular type of object. So a video object, or you could have an entity template for a product object. And that way you can customize the display or editing or whatever for that type of entity. So I'm actually doing that here. Let me show you how I'm doing it. When you add dynamic data to a website, here we go right here, you get all the templates, and you get this new folder with ASP.NET 4.0 called Entity Templates, and you get these 3 entity templates by default. The default one is what's shown for any entity. If you haven't explicitly specified a template, there's a default edit one, a default insert one. I've actually overridden the one for editing. That's why I had that yellow background on the thing you just saw. If I double click here, you'll notice that now I can actually control the appearance of that form for that template. That's why going back to this page right here, when you click on edit, it has this yellow background. Now, I didn't do a beautiful job here. I admit I was lazy. All I did was create a yellow background. But the basic idea is you can now make this look however you want, and can do that on an entity-by-entity basis. Okay. There's a bunch of other features which I'm not going to talk about because we're getting short on time. Inheritance, many relationships. I'll just show you the entity templates, and if you want to learn more about this, David Ebo has a talk devoted just to dynamic data tomorrow. So definitely go to his talk if you're interested in learning more about dynamic data. All right, so conclusion. So we have now with the ASP.NET framework, especially once we get to the ASP.NET 4.0 framework, there's a number of different types of applications that you can build using this framework. We all start off using the web forms version. We now have a powerful client-side AJAX framework. We also have just introduced this morning an MVC framework, and dynamic data is our scaffolding framework. One thing to realize, a lot of these things can be mixed and matched together, so you can use a lot of them in combination if you need to. ASP.NET web forms, it's all about control. We've added all these features to make it easier to have control over your source code and your rendered source code, client IDs, view state, we talked about that. So we've made it easier, and code snippets. We made it easier to work directly with your source code. With AJAX, this stuff is cool. I'll show you this stuff tomorrow. We've created a whole framework for doing everything on the client side, using templates and controls on the client side. With MVC, well, you're going to be seeing plenty of talks on that. That's our new framework that allows you to build patterns-based applications. And finally, I just showed you some of the new improvements to dynamic data. So if you want to learn more about any of this stuff, we just put up a white paper that goes over all the new improvements in ASP.NET 4.0. That's, again, at the official ASP.NET site. So go to asp.net/learn/white papers. And you can download this white paper that gives you a Visual Studio 2010 and ASP.NET 4 overview. And the other place to go to is go to Codeplex. Because if you go to the Codeplex site, we have previews of things like the ASP.NET AJAX and some of the features I've been talking about ASP.NET 4.0. So that's it for the talk. Please remember to turn in your evaluations. Also, if you want to contact me during the week, if you have feedback, which, again, I crave your feedback. I'd love to get some feedback back from you on some of the new features, especially around the Ajax Control Toolkit and standards. If you want to contact me, my email address is steven.walther@microsoft.com. And if you have any comments or you have any feedback on any of the new features that we talked about. All right. Any questions, please feel free to come up and ask right now. The routing? Yeah. Oh, yeah, great question. So the question is, the routing framework that's available in MVC, can we use that today in web forms? And the answer is sort of, but not officially. Because the issue is, ASP.NET routing was actually shipped as part of ASP.NET Service Pack 1, but what we haven't done is we didn't create the web forms route handler. And you'd have to write that yourself, and you can go to Phil Hack's blog. He's a guy, he was a program manager actually for the routing stuff. So go to Phil Hack's blog, and he actually has a sample of one for web forms. So you'd either have to write it yourself or steal his code to do it, and then you can start using it in web forms today. So the answer is we don't have the official support until 4.0 comes out, but we've already sort of given you the source code to do it, so it's not a huge challenge to do it if you really want to do it. Yes? That is not, that's still to be determined, as far as I know. I actually don't know what the release date is. Hopefully not too long. Yes? Uh-huh. Yeah, so you can, in a route pattern, you can create as many of those parameters as you want. So I want to, search, you can actually do things like this, or if you wanted to, you could even do, cat and, I don't know, is this valid? Would that be a valid URL? Can you put an and? You probably can't as part of a URL, can you? So you can, if you come up with a separator, you could do something like this. I think that's valid. But anyway, you can grab this out as, at least in MVC, if you had something like this, then you could create a separate parameter for each of these. So I could say, search / search 1. I'm trying to think, because in MVC, you can actually get a parameter array out of it inside of the handler, and I haven't really tried that yet on web forms. But there is the way, I know, you could use it. There's something called a wildcard. You can do it like that. You do star, and it has to be the last parameter. Like that, and then you can get a parameter array. I haven't tried this, but this is how you would do it in MVC, so this should be able to pass back in the route values. But you'd have to try it to make sure it works. Yes? Oh, and the URLs? That's a great question. Is there any way to email me that question, and I'll try to get you an answer on that, because that's a really great question. Yes? Is there any way to block access to the ASP Block access? Yes. So in the routing stuff, there's a property. I can't remember what's, okay, well, there's a couple of answers to that. So he's asked, the question is there any way to block access to normal ASPX files through routing? There's a couple of answers to that. First, if you're using the web forms routing, you can use the standard authorization sections in the web.config file. And we have a special, there's a third parameter when you're adding a route to tell it whether to pay attention to that. By default, it's turned on, so it's going to pay attention and block access using the normal authorization stuff within ASP.NET. The other part to that question is, let's see, delay. No, I think that's the best way of doing it, actually. Is that what you want? You want to be able to prevent? The other way is there's a property on the routing for whether it should automatically map to physical files. And that's turned on by default. So by default, it will go to an ASPX file. But if you turn it off, it should block you from doing that. All right, I'm getting a flashing red light with a beep beep sound at me, so I better get off the stage. But if you have any questions, please feel free to come up, or we can talk later on this week.